Welcome to Divcasts from the University of Chicago Divinity School. For more of our podcasts and information about our terms of use, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts.
So, without further ado, we'll open the second panel. So, it's of course a great pleasure and an honor for me to introduce the two speakers for this second panel, which is devoted to poetry reading. So, I will just say a few words about our speakers and a very, very short comment in way of introductions. So it is hardly necessary to introduce our first speaker, Michael Sells, who is at home here. So I think we can identify three main domains to which Michael Sells tremendously contributed. So first, when originally I think we have to mention the comparative approach to mystical traditions between the Greek, Islamic, Christian, and Jewish mystical traditions. A second very important domain is his work on religion and violence, which includes at least two monographs about contemporary issues. And finally, and we also, of course, have the domain of Quranic studies and the more classical Islamic tradition, with the very important Approaching the Quran, the early revelations, the second edition of which appeared in 2007, and translations of mystical poetry. And here I would mention the Stations of Desire, which focuses upon the love poetry of Ibn al-Arabi, which will be the topic of today's reading. The second speaker, our second speaker, is Professor Salim Qureshi, Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Alberta. His area of research is Middle Eastern, South Asian, and Islamic politics. He has served as Chair of Political Science and East Asian Studies, Associate Dean and Acting Dean of Arts, and as member of the Canadian delegation of the UN General Assembly. Urdu and Persian poetry have always been his love, and he has descended from a long line of poets and Sufis himself. He has enjoyed the company of great Urdu poets like Josh Madhyavati, Jigar Muradabadi, and Faiz Ahmed Faiz. So, just to maybe make a transition between our first panel and the discussion that we had and the present panel, I just wanted to not to make like original comments myself, but turn to the famous Indo-Persian poet Amir Khosrow and one of his ghazals, which is actually an argumentative ghazal in which he discusses the relationship between music and poetry. And so in this ghazal we have a very bold musician who comes to him and who says, so the line goes, مطربی میگفت خسرو را که ای گنج سخن علم موسیقی ز فن نظم نکوتر بود. So, which is to say, a musician came and told Khosrow, "Hey, treasure of speech, the science of music, علم موسیقی, is better than the craft of poetry." And so, this is how this ghazal starts, and at the end, Khosrow answers and says, no, poetry is actually superior to music, which can be also surprising maybe in the Indian context, since Amir Khosrow, we were discussing, Pahlavi is supposed to be one of the creators of this tradition. He says, no, poetry is superior. Why? Because نیست عیبی که عروسی خوب بی زیور بود. It is not a problem if a beautiful bride is without ornaments. So now that's what we'll do. We'll turn to the simple, to the simplicity of the beauty of poetry, the simplicity of course, which is very much related, and we do need guides and translators to bring us to this level of understanding. Thank you. So I will now turn to our first speaker, Michael Sells, whose presentation is entitled Love Lyrics of Ibn al-Farid and Ibn al-Arabi.
Thank you so much. And again, please let me know if the sound is not clear. Our discussion earlier today, two things struck me in the discussion. One was the notion of a non-essentialized sacred, that is, a sacred that doesn't reside in any particular thing, be it a prayer mat or a mosque or a particular song in itself, but is brought together from a complex set of interactions, each of which has a place, and that non-essentialized notion of the sacred, which Regula brought up, I thought is something that really relates to the whole issue of the poems I'm going to be discussing. So let me start off by reading a poem in translation. Then I'll go into the issue of how to relate translations to the Arabic original, and come back and read some poetry in the Arabic, and then come back to the original question about locating the sacred. This is the poem I'll start out with. I've called it Black Silver. Rein in your camels and turn toward the hard rock plain of Thumb, where the willow stalk is moist and meadows are laced with dew, where lightnings unfold for you their gleaming, where the clouds are early come and by evening gone. Lift your voice at the break of dawn, calling out each radiant, lissome, maiden beauty. Her glance, black silver flash, is fatal. Tender the bend of her neck as she turns. When she loves, she takes the dazed of heart lover of beautiful women, laying him low with a lance and a spear of crucible-fired Indian steel. She extends a hand as soft as undyed silk, anointed in oils of ambergris and cut musk. She turns you a gaze like that of a gazelle fawn wandering, eyes antimony, a collyrium of coquetry and mortal spells across her eyelids, her necklace blazing, never known, inordinate beauty. Slender she, the love I love, not loving, not true to the vow she's taken. She lets down her hair, black snake, to transfix with dread the one who follows. It's not, by God, the shades of death I fear, but to die, not seeing her in the after. So this is one of the 61 love lyrics, nasibs or ghazals, that are found in Ibn al-Arabi's Diwan Turjuman al-Ashwaq, the translator or guide or interpreter of ashwaq, longings or desires. if one took this poem and brought it into any group, I'd said, is this a religious poem or a non-religious poem? Is it a sacred poem or a profane poem? I think if people didn't know who had composed it, then the question would remain, indeed, an object of debate. And indeed, these poems by Ibn al-Arabi and, of course, poems by Hafiz and others have formed the heart of such debate over many centuries. Then the question is, why are many of the poems that are most loved within the tradition, are they those poems in which the line between the sacred and the profane is not given away in the poem? Of course, Ibn al-Arabi and many other poets who happen to have connections with Sufism can and do often place explicit markers within the poem that this is references to connections that would mark that poem as sacred. So that's the question I wanted to bring up, and I think that it goes from the point of view of Ibn al-Arabi's poetry, it goes deep into the question of his understanding of shauq, which the shauq or longing or desire, in the eros sense of the term, is actually the creative force within being, and it is, in that sense, the closest one can come to experiencing the divine. And since the divine in Ibn al-Arabi is neither here nor there, neither immanent nor transcendent, but both, it can't be put into a particular realm and excluded from another realm, then my way of reading this is it makes sense for these poems to be enacting that non-exclusivity by walking that boundary between the two in often very provocative ways. Now, I passed around a handout that is just a very basic, small item that I hope I can bring to the audience as a question and to our everyone here. One of the things that I think is well within the realm of possibility, but I haven't found a way of seeing it done much, is to take the poetic traditions and to make a gloss of a transliteration, a basic word-by-word gloss, and a chart of the metrical forms, and then to have them, like one has with a subscript in a film, or with a light moving along the transliteration, allowing a hearer who does not know the language in question to contact the sounds in connection with their meaning. And although this seems to be very eminently doable, and we actually had a small grant here, and we did put some poems on a website called Resolved. We weren't able to find anyone that was willing or able to do this kind of thing. Even though for the Quran, for example, there is a massive, the complex and sophisticated web world where exactly these kind of features are done. So this is something that I would like to bring to the Chicago spirit and say Chicago, the city of big shoulders and whatever else it is, can come up with a solution to this. So in our classes, or when we see a kalal like this, and we're wondering, what was that one verse that was recited over and over and over when that person went into Wajh? It could be there in a simple transliteration with a word by word, and we could follow. So let me just read this beginning of this poem by Ibn al-Farid in the Arabic. You have the first couple verses in the transliteration, and word by word, I'll just read a few verses. Ibn al-Farid, 7th Islamic century, 12th Christian century, lived in Mecca around the same time Ibn al-Arabi did. Neither one claims or mentions to have known the other. I find that very difficult. They both composed poetry in a very, very similar style. Here is the Arabic from that, just a little bit. Hel naru layla bedet laylan bidi salami. Ambarikun laha bizawra fal alami. Arwahan na'amana hella nasmatan saharan. وَمَاءَ وَجْرَةَ هَلَّا نَحْلَةٌ بِالثَّمِ يَا صَعْبِ الظَّعْنِ يَطْوِي الْبِيدَ مُعْتَصِفًا طَيِّ السِّجِلِّ بِذَاتِ الشِّيهِ مِنْ هِدَمِ أُجْبِ الْحِمَى يَا رَعَاكَ اللَّهُ. Now I'm gone beyond where it is on there. أُجْبِ الْحِمَى يَا رَعَاكَ اللَّهُ مُعْتَمِدًا خميلة الضال ذات الرند والخزم. This poem, Hel Naru Layla, has the fire, is at the fire of Layla, which has glowed in the night at the Salam, or has lightning made an apparition here and there, and following up with different poetic eyes speaking to different poetic addressees, sending messages, receiving messages back and forth, is one of the key poems in the tradition. And the famous Burda poem of Busiri is a play upon that. At least the first part of that poem is a muwarada, or istiqbal if we were in a different tradition, on that first several verses of that poem. And as many of you probably know, the bird poem of Busiri is considered to be the most performed poem in the Arabic world in the classical period, continually performed in honor of the Prophet Muhammad. I'd like now to read a couple more poems from Ibn al-Arabi. This is one of the only poems, this is the only poem in this short collection of poems that Ibn al-Arabi inserts a comment into. And I'm just going to read it first in translation. Ibn al-Arabi said, "An ascetic recited for me a verse the like of which I had never heard. The verse was, 'Everyone who wanted you, you showered with graces. Only to me did your lightning flash unfaithful. Its power amazed me, and I tracked after its meaning. I composed verses in this rhyme, including the original verse in full, as a response to that ascetic. May God Almighty rest his soul.'" This poem is based on one of the stations of the Lost Beloved, which the poet recalls in the first part of the classical Qasida in pre-Islamic and Islamic times, and which is a central feature of Ibn al-Arabi's poem. This station is called La'ala. "Stay now at the ruins in La'ala's fading. and in that wasteland grieve for those we loved. At the campsite, now abandoned, stay and call her name as your heart is softly torn away. For the time of one like me, spent near her moringa gossamer flowering, plucking at fruits in measure, and at the petals of a rose, red, ripening. Everyone who wanted you, you showered with graces. Only to me did your lightning flash unfaithful. Yes, she said, there we used to come together in the shade of my branches in that luxuriant land. My lightning was the flash of smiles. Now it is the blaze of barren stone. So blame that time we had no way of warding off. What fault was it of Lalai? I forgave her as I heard her speak, grieving as I grieved with a wounded heart. I asked her, when I saw her meadows, now fields of the four scouring, twisting winds, did they tell you where they take their noonday rest? Yes, she said, at Sand Hill, where the white tents gleam, with what they hold from all those rising suns of splendor. And some from the Arabic. قف بالطلول قف بالطلول الدارسات بالعلي واندب أحبتنا بذاك البلقع قف بالطلول الدارسات بالعلي واندب أحبتنا بذاك البلقع قف بالديار ونادها متعجبا منها بحسن تلطف بالتفجر أحتي بمثلي عند بانك قاطئا ثمر الخدود وورد رود عيني كل الذي يرجو نوالك أمتل ما كان برقك خلبا إلا معي قالت نعم قد كان ذاك الملتقى في ظل أفناني بأخصبي موضعي إن كان برقي من بروق مباسم واليوم برقي ضوء هذا اليرمعي فأعتب زمانا ما لنا من حيلة في دفعه ما ذنب منزل لعبي فأذقتها لما سمعت كلامها تشكو كما أشكو بقلب موجع تشكو كما أشكو بقلب موجع وسألتها لما رأيت ربوعها مصر الرياح الذاريات الأربع هل أخبرتك رياحهم برحيلهم؟ قالت نعم قالوا بذات الأجرع حيث خيام البيد تشرق بالذي تحويه من تلك الشموس الطلع. And finally, I'd like to read one that's in a somewhat different mode. This is a mode that combines the sublime with one could call the ridiculous or the bathotic. Ibn al-Arabi very much likes to extend the complaint of the lover from mourning the pain of the loss of the beloved into the most melodramatic registers at times before coming back to a more steady register. So this one has both. Like all the poems, these are 7th Islamic centuries poems that place themselves within the Arabian desert of the time of the Prophet Muhammad and the world of Majnun Layla and the poets that wandered the Wadi, speaking about that which they didn't really know. Blaze. First I'll read this translation. Dawn's edge they cut through ravines and gorges to kneel their camels in Wadi al-Aqiq. Sunrise they'd seen it, blaze above them on a mountain peak. The eagle soared near but fell back failing beneath it. Eggs of the ridge hawk tucked safely. Over great foundations it rises, blazoned and engraved like Castle Aquq. They carved a tale there, left for them for the telling. Oh, whose for a love broke longing stranger, who soared past Arcturus in aspiration and was ground underfoot like an ember out, staked his home in the constellation Aquila, and died as he sank, drowning through tears. Here in this place, love turned him over, without a friend, to the twists of fate. Oh, you who come down to the old well, you here treading this same hard ground, revive me, revive me, revive me, dawn and dusk, and I was robbed of a beauty radiant, willowy, redolent as musk is the scent she trails. She sways in soft inebriation. She sways in soft inebriation like a willow sprig touched by the winds as anemone petals parts silken. Dead on her curves from behind, like the waves of a dune of a pure sand, like the hump of a camel mare ambling in the haze. No scold to blame me, loving her, no friend. Blame me, scold, for loving her. My death will rattle my reply. Longings my mount, lonesomeness my mantle, deliriums my morning wine, tears my drink, day's end. And then an Arabic reading for the final moment. I'm going to have to stand up for this so I can see it better. سهيرا ناحوا بواد العقيق وقد قطعوا كل فج عميق وما طلع الفجر إلا وقد رأوا علما رائحا فوق نيق إذا رامه النصر لم يستطع فمن دونه كان بيد لنوقي عليه زخارف منقوشة رفيع القواعد مثل الوقوع وقد كتبوا أسطرا أودعوها على من صب غريب مشوق له همة فوق هذا السماك ويوطأ بالخف والحريق. ومسكنه عند هذا الوقابي وقد مات بالدمع موت الغريق قد أسلمه الحب بالحادثات بهذا المكان بغير شقيق ويا واردين مياه القليب ويا ساكنين بوادي العقيق ويا طالبا طيبة زائرا ويا سالكين بهذا الطريق أفيقوا علينا فإنا رزينا بعيد السحير قبائل الشروق بيداء غيداء بحتانة تدوع نشر كمسك فتيق تمايل السكر كمثل الغصون فنتها الرياح كمثل الشقيق بردف مخول كدأس لقى ترجرج مثل السنام الفليق فما لامني في هواها علول ولا لامني في هواها صديقي ولا لامني في هواها علول لكان جوابي إليه شهيقي فشوقي ركابي وحزني لباسي ووجدي صبوخي ودمعي خبوكي. These are some poems by Ibn al-Arabi I wish to share with you. I should notice that Ibn al-Arabi, of course, is the author of 150 works or so that are extant. One of them that's coming out in 36 volumes. Inshallah, if it can ever get that reedition done. And the author takes a different persona in almost all of them. There's a great deal of mystery about these poems. Were the poems of Ibn al-Arabi and Ibn al-Farid allegedly composed at the same time in the same place? And for those in geography, I'm wondering, how would it have been possible for two major poets, one of whom by then, Ibn al-Arabi, had worldwide acclaim, not to have heard of one another or heard one another's verses? And the other question I have, to leave with the question, is that throughout these poems, Ibn al-Arabi thematizes the impossible but actual realization of love between the Arab and the Persian, the Ajam and the Arab. And given that these poems are composed at the same time as those of Farid ad-Din Attar and other major Persian poets, that Ibn al-Arabi had Persian poets in his company. How likely is it that Ibn al-Arabi would have known enough Persian to have understood the poetry at that time? I'm convinced that this was a thematic, not only about the specific beloved Nizam, but a thematic about the cultural interaction, the erotics of cultural interaction through which this divine manifestation can be heard and voiced. So if anyone has any knowledge about whether Arabs who would never say they've heard Persian at this time, it would be, well, we would never say that we'd heard anything like that. But clearly they must have, and Ibn al-Arabi, I think, probably did. Thank you.
So we'll now turn to our, thank you very much, Professor Sells. We'll now turn to our second speaker and take a very brief moment at the end for maybe one or two questions. So Professor Salim Qureshi will talk to us about sublime rebellion, Iqbal's Urdu and Farsi verse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm essentially a political scientist, but I'm very much interested in poetry, both Urdu and Farsi. I was taught Farsi, and I can still speak Farsi, but my Farsi is Indian, and nobody in Iran understands. For today's presentation, I thought of a poet who had one foot in politics and the other in poetry, and that is Dr. Sir Muhammad Iqbal, 1876 to 1938. Iqbal is now, or since the birth of Pakistan, has been regarded as the poet, philosopher of Pakistan, and his poetry is sung on Radio Pakistan, TV, and radio all the time. And that poetry does contain issues which are profound and very much in need of understanding. So I have looked at Iqbal. He must have been a brilliant man. He went to Europe in 1905. He was there for 3 years, and during those 3 years, he qualified for the bar. He did a BA from Cambridge. He did a PhD from Munich. He wrote both in Urdu and in Farsi. The British knighted him for his poetry. But Iqbal's real thoughtful work actually goes beyond his poetry, and those are his lectures on the reconstruction of religious thought in Islam, which he composed in English, delivered them in English in 1923 at the invitation of Madras Students' Union. Iqbal's work, after a long time, has been carried on, or was carried on by your own Professor Fazlur Rahman here at Chicago University, and now the mantle has been taken up by Sorbonne Professor Muhammad Arkoon. Iqbal perhaps was the first person to conceive of the idea of an independent Muslim state in India, although he didn't say it in exactly so many words, but the idea was there, which he enunciated at the All India Muslim League conference in 1931. He didn't use the word Pakistan, which was coined in 1934 by Chaudhry Rahmat Ali, who was a student at that time at Cambridge. Now, Iqbal has some connection with Sufism also. But let me put it in the words of another poet equally famous with the 19th century, Ghalib, who said, "Gowa nahi, पैबा के निकाले हुए तो हैं और काबे से इन बुतों को भी निस्बत है दूर की." That is, they are not there, but they were kicked out of there. And so these idols have an old connection with the Kaaba. Now, Sufi Islam emphasizes love of God, reaching close to God, as against Sharia Islam that places a premium on obedience to law. In Iqbal's thought, this love is not just submission. It is more about closeness than just prostration. As Iqbal said at one place, ये जन्नत मुबारक रहे जाहिदों को कि मैं आपका सामना चाहता हूँ. That is, let the pious enjoy the pleasures of paradise. I don't care for paradise. I want the countenance of God. In Iqbal's thought, this search is a constant struggle to elevate human beings to nearness of God, which sometimes leads to rebellion, symbolized by the disobedience of Iblis, the Satan, and sometimes to man becoming co-creator with God. It is an active effort rather than senseless mantra of God is, God is, God is. So I'm first going to read the Urdu poem in Urdu, and then I'll give you English translation, and then I'll give you the Persian and the English translation. The Urdu poem is actually a dialogue between Jibreel, that is Gabriel, and Iblis, Lucifer, Satan. Jibreel, हम दबे दरी न कैसा है जहाने रंग बू. इब्लीस, सोज साजो दर्द दावो जुस्तजुओ आरज़ू. जिब्रील, हर घड़ी अफलाक पर रहती है तेरी जुस्तजू. क्या नहीं मुमकिन कि तेरा जाके दामन हो रफू. और खुद ये इनकार से तूने मकामाते बुलंद और चश्मे यज़्दा में फरिश्तों की रही क्या आबरू. इब्लीस, आ ऐ जिब्रील, तू वाकिफ नहीं इस राज से और कर गया सरमस्त मुझको टूट कर मेरा सुबह. गर कभी फुर्सत मैसर हो तो पूछ अल्लाह से, किस्से आदम को रंगीन कर गया किसका लहू. और मैं खटकता हूँ दिले यज़्दां में कांटे की तरह और तू पकड़ अल्लाह अल्लाह अल्लाह. Now I'll read the translation. Jibreel, old comrade, how is the world of color and smell? Iblis, it is a world of ecstasy and agony, of pain and pleasure, of effort and desire. Jibreel, all the time in heaven we search for you. Is it not possible that your error be remedied? Oh, Iblis, by your disobedience you forfeited access to the lofty heights. And on top of that, you embarrassed angels in the eyes of God. Iblis, oh my dear Jibreel, perhaps you're not in the know of this secret. By breaking my goblet, conferred eternal ecstasy of me. If you ever have a few spare moments, then ask God, whose sacrifice was it that conferred colorfulness on the episode of Adam? I prick the conscience of the Creator constantly like a stinking thorn. And what do? You just keep muttering, God is, God is, God is. Allahu, Allahu, Allah. That is one. The second is worship. Now, Iqbal recognizes that God is the creator. But then he elevates human beings to be co-creator with God rather than just the slave. And this is in Farsi. Tu shab afridi, chirag afridam, sayal afridi, ayag afridam, bayabano kosaro aag afridi, khayabano gulzaro baag afridam, mananam ke asang ai nasasam, mananam ke asah noshi nasasam. The man says to God, you created the night, and I created the light. You created the liquid, and I created the cup. You created the wilderness, the mountains, the deserts, and I created the pavilions, the gardens, the parks. I am the one who transforms stone into mirror. I am the one who extracts nourishment out of poison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're a little behind, but I think we can take one or two questions. So the floor is open. Yes?
I was really happy to have you put the bells on the poetry that you wrote in the handout. But I was a little bit. My question is, what I couldn't recognize. I could recognize the last one, but the others didn't seem so regular. Did I miss something, or are those various meters not observed that closely in the poems, as I am used to from Persian and from Urdu?
2 points about the meters in the poems. One is different readers recite in different ways, either highlighting the meter very strongly or highlighting more the syntax. And I tend toward the latter. But the meter of the poem, the last one I recited, is in fact not used that much in Arabic. It's more, it was used at this time a lot in Farsi poetry. And it is short, short, long, short, short, long, da da da, da da da, da da da. So, or short, long, long. So it starts with the short, ends with the long, and there are 3 beats. Suhayrun nahu biwad al-aqidi faqad qata'u kull fajrin amidi. So that is that particular meter, which you're absolutely right, is not one of the more common classical Arabic meters like Basit or W.
Yes? Question in the back?
Yeah, so I was wondering, when you're translating, how do you determine when you strike a balance between creating something that expresses the spirit of the text in English and something that sort of more literally translates what's there in Arabic or in Farsi?
So it applies to both speakers.
Say it again. So I thought you were addressing him, so I didn't pay that much attention.
So in translation, how, and this may be more pertinent for Professor Sells, I'm not sure, but how do you strike a balance between expressing something that gives the spirit of the text, where someone who's maybe a native English speaker is really going to get the spirit of the poem, and translating it more literally, where you're conveying what's more literally there in the Arabic or the Farsi.
But poetry really cannot exactly be translated, because a single word may actually refer to a whole cultural background. And if you are not familiar with that background, then the word means nothing, and a literal translation is actually meaningless. What I try to do is to so formulate the translation that it comes as close to the sense of what the poet is trying to convey, rather than give a literal translation or try to explain the cultural past. That's what I try to do.
Thank you, and thank you for those extraordinary readings and translations. I just wanted to address that point by mentioning the untranslatables. Certain things, I think all of us have come up and say, well, there's no way you can translate this concept, this expression. So, for example, some of the untranslatables in the Arabic poems from the period of Ibn al-Farid and Ibn al-Arabi are the station of al-alam. Alam is a word that can mean a sign, a symbol, a monument on the horizon, anything that would guide a Bedouin along the path, a cairn, that is stones piled on one another. Of course, later on it comes to mean a proper name and a flag, etc. So when you see the station al-alam, is it a place name called the alam, or is it a reference to the monument? Often with place names, sometimes I'll translate some of them and not translate others. Because, of course, a name, proper name, cannot really be translated. And yet, if one has a series of 10 names in Arabic, stations of the beloved, that are simply transliterated into English with coughs and ayns and all kinds of things that the English reader is not going to have a clue about, then a lot is lost. So in some cases, I'll look to the root meanings of the word and translate it according to something that might be similar in a landscape and a poetic landscape, physical landscape and poetic landscape. So Timberlands, if she heads toward Yemen, is one time where I looked up the meaning of the word, twin mounts, etc. Another one that's untranslatable is laha, the verb laha, which can be rendered appear, but it loses all its power. As I see it in the poetry, something that is characterized by that verb raises questions about, is it there or is it not there? And if it's there, what is it really? So, ambarikun lahat. A flash, that apparition. Sometimes the sense of apparition has some of that ghostly quality in it. In the other poem that I called Blaze, the last one I read, I didn't translate the word for laha, but I tried to build around it the sense of this appearance of something at the boundary of consciousness and unconsciousness, inside and out. Is it really there or not? So often I view the untranslatable as a sand, a piece of sand, and I try to think of a poem as trying to take that irritant, which our friend Iblis said that he was he was the irritant of the deity around which the pearl might possibly, ideally, grow? Thank you. That's some thoughts on this extremely important question.
So I'm sorry, but I think we'll have to stop here for now. So let us thank again.
We thank you for listening to or viewing our podcast. For more information and for other podcasts, please see our website, divinity.uchicago.edu/podcasts. Copyright, the University of Chicago Divinity School.